Don't be scared. I wrote it down this time.
Fear ye not.
You want us to do a wave?
Well, you all know me. I can't tell you. I said, Tom, it's just so wonderful. It's the people that that just fill my heart. I looked around this room, and every time I looked, I saw somebody who had come, and I was just so moved. I sent out a little note. This has been a complicated talk for me. It's on forgiveness. God knows I need all the help I can get in that area. But I wanted to share it. I was so moved to do the talk. I mean, it was like another talk on forgiveness, and you ask for help, and then they give you help, and then you say, "Are you sure? You really want me to?" So they were sure, and so I spent a lot of time researching the talk and a lot of time preparing the talk, and that's not always my way. I've been blessed lately that I just kind of channel information that Spirit wants you to have. And the sense I had of it all as I was doing this is Spirit wanted me to get it right. And that there were tools that I could bring if I did the right research and did the right reaching out. And so I did that. But then what happened is I got pretty far into my left brain. Now, there's nothing the matter with my left brain. It's okay. You got to live there most of the time in order to get the garbage out. But if you really want to share with people that you love, and I'm just, I can just feel it already, you have to get back into your right brain. And so I have a little trick for that. But it's going to require all of your helping, and Janet and April to come up here so that I don't go off. You know what I'm going to ask.
That was coming.
Of course you knew it was coming. Because I think you have to be a part of it. That's what makes it work, is if you're a part of it. And the way to be a part of it is to get absolutely clear, just for a little minute, if that's all you want to do. Just
No,
go
I'm fine.
in for a few
You're going to be
minutes,
walking.
get clear. But get clear on just how wonderful you are. Forget that. We're glad to think that Janet is wonderful. Who could make up a song like that? Or April, look at all the wonderful services she did. But we have to be wonderful in our heart for ourselves, because we are. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here on the planet, but we especially wouldn't be here in this room with all this light if we weren't wonderful. And the best way, I think, to get in touch with that is a little music. And if these ladies would help me, my very favorite song, that even calls it Mary's song. It's
How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than old? How could anyone fail to notice that your love
forgot my glasses. Is that anything?
Well, it's a good thing you wrote it down then, huh?
Yeah, good thing. I thought originally that I would talk about forgiveness at the annual conference. Is this right?
It could be. Wait a minute.
Is this better? Is this better? No.
Not yet.
Don't help me. Thanks.
There, how's that?
That's okay. Thanks. I'm gonna lean into it. Okay.
Lean into it.
Lean into it.
Give it all you
Oh,
got.
Lord, be patient. We're coming. You know, I was going to talk about forgiveness at the annual conference, but it just didn't fit. You know, we had a lot of things going on, and we tried to deal with it, and it didn't exactly fit in. And I said, well, okay. Spirit through the board. He said, not now, Mayor. And then when I was drawn to it this time, I knew why. Because we are stumbling towards a very violent conflict again. People in power are now saying, let's arm everyone. The Iranians are happy to arm the Palestinians. The Americans are happy to arm the Israelis. The Russians are happy to arm the Eastern separatists. We're happy to arm the Ukraine. We're creating a mechanism for proxy wars. And I read a book once, whose name I don't remember, but the storyline I certainly remember. And in the storyline, this visitor to a universe was walking along with his tour guide. And all of a sudden, people paused, and then they were looking at something, and then some of them started walking to this gray building. And the visitor said, so, what's going on? And the tour guide said, well, in this country, in our universe here, we figured out a new way to do war. And what we decided was that it's a terrible waste of buildings and money and environment if we destroy all those things during a war. So we have the leaders of our country play a game, like some kind of a board game or video game, or God knows what kind of a game. And as the game is played, the number of casualties on each side are recorded. And at the end of the game, there's a winner and there's a loser. But the casualties on each side are then randomly selected from the population as a whole, and a little beeper goes off in their pocket, and they're supposed to march to these death chambers. But the buildings, of course, are all right.
Is that like Fahrenheit 451 or something like that?
Huh?
Oh, I was thinking, is that Fahrenheit 451 or one of those? Anyway, I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Anyway.
I don't remember, but it wasn't that one.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, the point I said, I didn't even totally finish the book. I said, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Who would do it? And who would go? I mean, obviously, it'd never work in America. But I thought, what are we doing now? What we're doing now is we're creating a proxy. We're saying, we're not willing to give up war, but we're going to have somebody else fight it. And the powers that be say, arm them, arm them. And the other powers that be say, oh, don't worry about that, just send in the drones. Because then you can make war less awful. Except the people that have to go to the chambers, the people that fight the proxy, they have mothers and brothers and people who love them. So pretty soon the story leaks out. And we can't kid ourselves anymore that it doesn't matter, that it's not us. You know, my poison by quarry bias is you have to watch them for what the secret plan is. And I wonder if because Americans have been so resistant to sending our own soldiers to war, that it's helped to energize this, let's just arm the other guys. I don't know. But we can't kid ourselves anymore, so we have to look differently. Let's look differently. And we say, conflict happens in relationships. It happens in relationships because they have friction, because they're with people that are not us. They have misunderstandings. We have unreasonable power trips. We have poor judgment, righteous indignation. All of those things create friction in a relationship. And it creates friction in mega relationships between countries and states. And it creates friction between meta relationships, like between business and labor, sometimes even a church and its members. And it creates problems in individual relationships, whether they're families or friends or even mere acquaintances. A peace-loving metaphysical person that I know quite well and had admired, has quite evolved, said to me one time recently, obviously, I just spoke to my sister that I haven't spoken to in 14 years. I said, 14 years? Oh my goodness, what happened? And this loving, kind person said, I don't know. She got her feelings hurt and just didn't call. 14 years? Do you know how many times in 14 years you could use the support of a sister or a brother that understood you? Do you know how many times in 14 years you would have laughed over something that brought back a memory of a silly thing that happened in your childhood? Do you know how many times in 14 years you would have laughed and clapped with joy over the growth of the next generation that's coming along? 14 years. What a waste. What a waste. So there are consequences on failure to fix things. So why don't we? Part of the reason we don't is that we are biologically developed to remember painful things. Now, who would have thought it? You know, who would have thought it? And what we now have as resources, we didn't have or haven't had for a very long period of time. Look at psychology and counseling and personal awareness and exploring yourself. That's been around for about 150 years. How about learning from what other people did through reading the books? That's been around about 500 years. Now let me tell you that in evolution, that's a spit. Mm-hmm. So the biology that helped us to remember that the tiger will eat you, tra-la, tra-la, has been in place for who knows how many millions of years we've been in place that we don't know, whatever time is, but it's not the same. So the biology, if you look at the scientific evidence for it, so the biology creates a memory. And there are ways that you can energize that memory, and in fact you have to overcome not energizing that memory. Because every time you think about the memory, you add energy to it. If the event occurred with other people, and you talk about it with those other people, you re-energize each other's memory of it. That's how it works. And the bigger the group of people, the more energy and the longer the memory will last. Tom and I know about that because we have lived in the South. Now I want to tell you,
Yes, you did.
there have been wonderful people in the South, but many of the ones we met, they talk about the invasion from the North.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, I didn't know what they were talking about, but being me, I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, the invasion from the North. You know, the war where the North invaded us to destroy us and our way of life. Oh, you mean the Civil War? the war where you fired on Fort Sumter first. I only said that once because that's really. You know, they feel so often as though it might have happened yesterday, and they are all, without a shadow of a doubt, anybody who feels this way, who's held on to this, had an uncle whose barn was burned by Sheridan, is that the one?
Sherman.
Sherman's March to the Sea.
I knew it was an S word. See, I don't have my glasses, I had to write on the paper. And Sherman would have had to be in the South for 3 years to have burned the number of barns that they believe he was burned in the places that they think they were burned, that he never was. Not that Sherman's march was a wonderful thing, but it's what happens when you energize a negative memory and you hold it together by still driving around with a flag with 3 stripes and 7 stars painted on the back of your truck, hung over your city, your state. We were in Germany. I anticipated having some memory there, but not what we found. We were on a tour, a wonderful tour. And we had a wonderful tour guide. And in the morning, we had one day in Berlin, if you can imagine trying to cram everything into one day in Berlin. But we tried, and so we were in Berlin, and we had a wonderful tour guide. And then he began to talk to us about the real history of Germany, which of course was pre any of the things. So when we got to East Berlin, we got World War II and post-history. But when we did West Berlin, he talked about real history, 1300s, and how those Swedes came in their boats and they took over Germany. And, you know, and by the time he was through, I wasn't sure if I should get back into the tour car or run to the ocean to see if they were coming. It's that energized when people begin to talk about or think about some terrible thing that happened. Now, he was a thespian, so I think part of it was his style of engaging us. But it couldn't have happened if he hadn't encountered it himself in people who were talking about things. And I share that with you because we are social animals. We forget that. We survived and came out ahead because we were able to create groups. One of the heartbreaking things about Bosnia-Herzegovina, anywhere near what I should be saying,
Close.
was that families who had intermarried broke apart and returned to their tribe when there was war. So when you are when there is war, there is some disposition that I don't know about that forces or encourages and supports people returning to their tribe, as opposed to the progress they've made in loving relationships. It breaks your heart. So what are we going to do about it? We have to do something to intervene and say, the first step on this is forgiveness. And to me, no sense starting with countries. I mean, sometimes we'd like to. I'll send a letter. That'll turn the world around.
Yeah.
But you can't start with countries. We have to start. We have to start as an individual and create the forgiveness that Dottie told us in our meditation to create in your hearts, because that creates an energy. We in this room understand that energy is created and focused by our attention. So let's create the right kind of energy for this set of circumstances. And so let's talk about what forgiveness is and isn't. And let's start with what it isn't, because what it isn't often gets in the way of our being able to do that practice. And what it isn't is condoning whatever the act was. You don't have to say that what they did was right after all, when in your heart of hearts you know it was wrong. You don't have to say that to forgive someone and free up your own heart. There's no need to condone what happened. This is really going on inside of you. You don't have to excuse what happened. If he'd had a better father, he never would have said that, I'm just sure of it. You don't have to excuse it. What they did, and it hurt. But I am going to move beyond it. You don't have to pardon it. You know, we have judges that pardon and big people that pardon. Pardon is like condoning. I know you did this terrible thing, but I'm going to forgive you it. No, you don't have to pardon it. You certainly don't have to forget it. Whoever said forgive and forget must have been 12 years old and never had a bad moment. I mean, we're biologically predetermined to hold this stuff. We may never be able to forget it. We probably shouldn't be able to forget it. But we can change how we respond to it. That's what sucks your energy. That's what makes you sick. And forgiving isn't reconciliation. Sometimes reconciliation would be wonderful, but it takes two for reconciliation. And you don't have any control over that other person.
That's right.
You only have control over this person, as best we can. I'm always trying to control this person, but that's why I thought about that when they told me to do the talk. I thought, of all people, I'm one who has to struggle with this all the time, and when I get it wrong, I get it big wrong, big visible wrong, poke a stick in their eye. And they said, right. So obviously I'm the one who should do the talk, because I'm the one who needs the lesson too. You know, I've always distrusted skinny woman in the full-figured store, you know. What are you doing here? How can you possibly know what I can look good in? But anyway, that's a whole subject. Let's talk about forgiveness. What is forgiveness? I may need my glasses for this, Gare. I need your glasses.
Do you want me to go home?
Sunglasses.
You want me to go home and get them?
They're my first, but I'll take yours.
Watch out, watch out.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Thanks, baby. You know how many times he's heard it? He could tell me what it is. Forgiveness is the intentional and voluntary process by which a victim undergoes a change in feeling and attitude regarding the offense.
Wow.
That's what forgiveness is.
Read it again.
Can you say that again?
Okay.
Slowly.
It is the intentional, you have to choose it, and voluntary, nobody can make you do it, process, means it's more than one thought or step or moment, by which a victim, that's the person who's been wronged, undergoes a change in feeling and attitude regarding the offense. Pretty good, huh?
It's a lot.
I searched a lot of places, but I found it in our old favorite Wikipedia.
Yippee. Thank goodness for Wikipedia.
So why bother? Some think we should bother, because it's proven scientifically that the person who suffers from the holding of non-forgiveness is the person who suffers the consequences. Physically, they are more likely to suffer heart and digestive disease, and the longer you hold on to it, the more significant the health issues become. And they call over 2 years way too long. That's when it's moved into long-term, holding on. Why else should we bother? So in preparation for this talk, I researched, I can't say I fully studied, but I researched many, many religions to see what they had to say about forgiveness. And I'll spare you the list, but two of my favorite were Judaism and Buddhism. And I want to share you interesting little things I found about both. In Judaism, a significant spiritual practice is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And on Yom Kippur, you pray to God to forgive you for the sins you've made against God. But in Judaism, before you pray to God for forgiveness, you have to go and get forgiveness from those who have wronged you. You have to go and apologize. You have to figure out who you've wronged, and you have to go to them and say, I'm sorry. Now, it works in Judaism because they're all doing it at the same time. So Yom Kippur is incredibly powerful. But the thing that I was really moved by is the next step. And that is, if you go to the person and you ask their forgiveness, and the person doesn't forgive you, the person who doesn't forgive you assumes the burden and the pain of the incident.
Whoa.
Think about that. That is the belief that they operate under. If you do not forgive when someone asks your forgiveness, you assume the burden and the pain of the incident. Gave me pause.
And then it's on you. Mm-hmm.
But my personal favorite was Buddhism. Buddhism sees forgiveness as a practice that you never, to prevent harmful thoughts from causing havoc in your mental well-being. You know, the part of Buddhism says you have to let go of, your goal in life is to come to a balance, a personal balance. You're not as focused on a God source as the monotheistic religions. You have to come to a personal balance. When you come to that personal balance, you're not bounced off by what other people bring from the outside to you. So that's the goal in Buddhism. It's a noble goal. Maybe next lifetime. But they say if you continue to hold on to this, you develop what they call mind karma.
Ooh.
So now you have to deal with it in another lifetime if you don't clean it up in this time. Wow. Holding on to feelings of hatred and ill will leave a lasting effect on your mind karma. The Buddha also says, when you pick up hot coals to throw at a transgressor, you always burn your own hands first.
Ooh.
And there was a wonderful speaker at CCL one time who talked to us about dealing with hurts and using forgiveness. And she said, when injured, you should examine and understand what happened. But don't build a tent there. And stay there endlessly. Examine it, deal with it, and move on. Thank you, Eileen.
There's our Eileen.
So hopefully you have begun to agree. Forgiveness is a good goal, but it's difficult. So a real speaker would have some thoughts on how to work down the path of forgiveness. So here we go. Express yourself.
Knowledge and express. Yes. Sorry.
It's okay, I'm on your team. Express yourself, and there are several ways you can express yourself. You can go to the person that you had the problem with and ask to talk about it. And that's wonderful if it happened fairly recently and you're pretty sure that you and the person are going to be able to talk about it in a reasonable way and not just rekindle the coals of yesterday's drama.
That's the challenge.
Can you repeat that part?
Okay? What you can do is talk about it with the person involved, provided too much time hasn't gone, and that you think you can do it in a way without just rekindling the coals of yesterday's drama. Because we do get caught in the drama. Parts of us always want the other person to know that they hurt our feelings. You hurt my feelings. And regretfully, particularly in the workplace, the person who hurt your feelings, they probably don't care. I mean, they don't do feelings, especially in a workplace where women have been rising to levels that balance where men are. And I had a wonderful management coach once who said, Mary, stop thinking you're going to get your emotional needs met here.
Whoa.
This is not the place to get your emotional needs met. This is the place to do your job. Get your emotional needs met somewhere else. If you keep pulling on these people to try and get your emotional needs met, they're not going to trust your business strategy. They're going to think that all you care about is how everybody feels. Best advice I ever got, changed my career, made a big difference. So, obviously there are risks in talking to the person directly, but another option is to talk about it with a trusted friend. And I think that's very good, but I would caution you to set the stage for that discussion. You need to tell the person before you start the story that what you want to do is work on forgiveness for this. Because if you just launch into the story, the person you picked as your trusted friend is already on your side. That's the point. So before you can get to the place of forgiveness, they're usually telling you what a ratter that other person was. So you need to set the stage, is what I want to do here, is to have some support so that I can manifest forgiveness. It's killing me, and it is. A third option is to journal. Write it down. Talk to the book. And they say, and trust me on this, I've done the research, I've read several research projects, and what they say is you can't just write down how you felt.
Exactly.
You have to write down how you're going to change things, how you're going to change yourself, what happened. It's good to keep writing, and it's good to express your emotions. What am I doing?
No, you're fine.
Oh, okay, I'm fine.
Of course.
It's good to express your emotions, but you have to express more than your emotions, or it's just burning those coals again. So you have to say, how can I change this? What happened beyond that? How can I improve it? And, you know, this is very handy if the person that you have not had a chance to forgive and has crossed over. It happened with me. I know it can work. We wouldn't be in this room if we didn't believe there's more to life than life. So you don't have to say, I never resolved it with my mother. You can say, Mother, I'm going to write you a letter.
That's right. Come and read it.
And in this letter, I'm going to explain how I felt when XYZ happened. But I know, you know, and as you write the letter, you'll get clearer. It was amazing. Maybe Mother didn't understand quite what was happening, or maybe anything. But if you do this outward act, you can generate forgiveness. It takes a huge burden off your soul. It allows you to reframe it. Many of the helpful, health, H-E-A-T-H, H-E-A-L, never mind, are reframing.
That's right.
And when you're reframing, you look for something positive. And if you can never think of anything positive, then I suggest you start keeping a gratitude journal. And when you go to bed, you write down 3 good things that happened to you that day, so that you can begin to find gratitude. You can begin to find positive things in a complex world, because you have to tune yourself for that. You have to try and develop empathy, not sympathy. It's the understanding that there may be negative things that occurred in a discussion that you thought was minor, and the other party brought a 2x4 to it. Maybe they had a 2x4 from the meeting they were in before they got to you. There are any number of ways, but it isn't always all about you. It's hard to remember that, you know, that the person was upset and spoke in a harsh, loud manner, but it really wasn't all about you. It was about a lot of other things. Then you need to protect yourself and then move on. Now, it's not only okay to develop self-protection means, it's vital. And especially if you have ongoing exposure to somebody you continue to always have negative relationships with. You have to journal again, or talk to somebody about, what can I do to protect myself if this happens, then the person responds this way and talks about me badly in the workplace, or takes credit for my work, or whatever it is. I use the workplace because I was there a lot. And you don't say, okay, then before I put my idea out, I'm going to ask to meet with my boss and run it by him. And say, can I put this idea out? What do you think about it? Or you say, if this person begins to talk about me, I'm going to develop my own group, which I talk about, you know, how, or you're going to deal with them directly, or you're going to look for a new job. Whatever it is, you need to have a plan to protect yourself if this problem is going to recur. And because we have these now wonderful tools, like a book, like a counselor, I encourage people to move outside themselves and get outside help if you need it. Forgiveness is work. But for your health and your karma and your daily joy, it is worth it. And each time one of us does it, there's more forgiveness in the world. And one day we'll reach a tipping point. And that balance will move to the fact that there's more forgiveness than fear. And when there's more forgiveness than fear, things will change. and you can work with forgiveness, and you can work with prayer. I often have to discipline myself and say, stop trying to figure out the answer. Ask, ask, ask. I mean, we as humanity on this place with a purposeful God are always striking the balance between what do I have a responsibility to do and what should I turn over. And in this room, in some rooms I would ask that they start to develop a concept on personal responsibility, but I don't have to do that in this room. This room is full of people who have an understanding of personal responsibility. What I say to you is ask, ask, ask. Ask for help, ask for intervention, ask for understanding. Because I do believe in an intervening God, whatever her name is. Thank you for sharing.
Bravo.